All right, welcome back to the Cross Connection, everybody. There's a lot of frustration in the country right now. I know you know, because just when you're outraged about the latest killing of yet another unarmed black man and in disbelief that the Senate will not pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, the very intentional massive assault on voting rights amps up. And just as we're bleeding from 1,000 cuts, women's rights are rolled back with the overturning of Roe. And just when you're about ready to lose it, there's yet another mass shooting. And we haven't even gotten to the economy, inflation, and just everyday life. So some are wondering why they actually risked it all for this hot mess gridlock government we have now, and wondering if the folks who don't feel the pain like we feel the pain can even understand the urgency for all of us. So let's talk about it. Joining me now, Fernand Amandi, he's a Democratic pollster and MSNBC political analyst. Back with me, Brittany Packnett-Cunningham, MSNBC contributor and host of the Undistracted podcast. I just did that podcast. And Lynn Nguyen, she's the executive director for Run AAPI. All right, Fernand, I'm going to kick it off with you because there is a lot of frustration among people right now. And I'm just curious what you say to people who feel like the system and this government just doesn't work anymore for them. And when they feel despondent, like nothing matters, which I completely understand. This is not judgment. We want people to vote and participate. But after people have done that and they're feeling the frustration and they're not seeing a lot of tangible change right now, what's the message to them?
Well, Tiffany, first off, I think people need to understand just because you may be dissatisfied with your own political party does not mean that you are going to necessarily go to the other side or the other party. And I think that's something that a lot of folks are concerned about right now. Can I be critical of the Democratic actions or lack thereof in certain areas? And does that enable the Republican side? And I think the answer to that is no. In fact, that's called being an American. It's good when your constituents hold you accountable. Think of it in these terms. It's almost like when you order a pizza. Yeah, the neighborhood pizza joint, they may not get it there within 30 minutes like they promise. It may even be missing a topping or two, but it'll eventually get there. It'll taste good. The Republican Party, meanwhile, wants to throw you in jail for exercising your right to put pizza in your body. So this is what is at stake. And yes, the Democrats need to probably rise to the occasion a little bit more so. But there is no alternative right now because the Republican Party project today is a fascist authoritarian project that wants to take away our rights and end our democracy.
Yeah, I think that's the important thing here, Lynn, because I hear a lot of people's frustration, and I really want it to be intentional. This is not about just crapping on the Democratic Party. I'm not a mouthpiece for the party by any means, but it's not about, you know, just crapping on them, but saying to people how we can bring that fight and how we can keep up the momentum, because we really are. There are a lot of people who are being bled by 1,000 cuts right now who are frustrated. I want you to take a listen. President Biden spoke on it earlier this week, and his message to the American people was very simple. Vote. Take a listen.
Right.
The challenge from the court to the American women and men, this is a nation. The challenge is go out and vote. Well, for God's sake, there's an election in November. Vote, 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 vote. Consider the challenge accepted, court.
The challenge is a lot of people don't have until November. They're feeling the brunt of this right now. So what's your message to folks who feel despondent?
It was so hard listening to that, Tiffany, because I've organized for the Democrats specifically for years now. And the thing is that people already don't trust politicians and they don't trust the institutions that they work in. So, and we know that in 2020, people hustled. They organized. They waited in line for hours to be able to vote for Biden. And they're all likely asking, like, what did that get us? So in this moment, like this messaging of vote and vote harder, it is such a bad response, again, in this moment. And I think, like, taking a step back, Tiffany, I think Democrats have kind of forgotten that voting is a means. It is not the end, right? We are kind of done with these speeches, with these press conferences, but people want to see Biden, the administration, our vice president, taking bolder action. And I will never forget this, but last week, I mean, we even had Senator Elizabeth Warren coming out incredibly hard on Biden and specifically saying that a Washington, D.C. insider will never meet this moment. You know, and like, I just cannot agree more.
Yeah, you know, and Brittany, this is part of the challenge, you know, because you and I tweet and text about this all day. Part of the challenge is relaying the horror of white supremacy on people who have never been on the receiving end of it. Biden believes in the inherent goodness of people because he's never experienced the brunt force of white violence. He's an institutionalist who says things like, I'm going to work with Republicans, not I'm going to beat these Republicans. So for those of us who are feeling the brunt force of what that looks like, and we are descendants of the people who felt the bloody bruises of what that looks like, how can we relay that message like, hey, go hard or go home, Slim, because now is not the time for bipartisanship. We don't want to hear that. We want to hear how you're going to beat this man, not how you're going to work with him.
Period, Tiffany. I mean, it was fascinating to see the number of people who, for the very first time ever, decided, hey, maybe July 4th isn't a holiday that I want to celebrate because I don't feel all that free. For a whole lot of us, we haven't been feeling free for a very long time. Suddenly, people are recognizing that the rights that they thought were automatic, that were inherent because they are an American, because they have the racial identity or gender identity that they have, they thought that those things were secure. Well, guess what? They are not. I couldn't agree with you more, Tiffany. The urgency of the moment is what we have to keep communicating. And it is really easy to condescend millennials and Gen Zers as if we are just some privileged lot, but the fact of the matter is we are enduring record levels of student loan debt. We are enduring a climate crisis that threatens our very existence. We have low and stagnant wages. We are certainly not able to put a low down payment on a home and own that home and build generational wealth for our families. We're under the threat of constant gun violence, of constant identity-based violence, and that is the tip of the iceberg. Look, we have seen the evil of the Republicans. There is no doubt about that, and I will continue to shout that from the rooftops. But you can't condescend people to the polls. And yelling at young people to go and vote is not actually effective. My question to the Democrats is, do you want to be right or do you want to be effective? You have to match the urgency of the moment with this same energy. Otherwise, we'll not just see political disenfranchisement and disenchantment for this election cycle, we'll continue to see it for years to come. Young people are on track, according to the latest Harvard youth poll, to vote in the same numbers that they did the last election cycle, but 56% of them believe that are no longer able to meet the challenge. And that is what the Democrats.
Yeah, look, Fernand, Britt made such good points there because, you know, it seems like some of the campaign strategy is still operating pre-2016. You know, Democrats are still maneuvering a certain way. And this is not crapping on the party, but this is an opportunity for Democrats to inspire folks. So I wonder from you what you think the better campaign strategy is. Do you appease the politically homeless and, you know, go after those red state voters and try to, you know, move them over to the Democratic Party? Or do you go hard in the paint and inspire a new generation of voters who may not currently be considered as reliable at the polls, but these are people like very much like Barack Obama did, who would risk it all just to show up at the polls and vote for him? Because the middle of the road approach that some Democrats are taking, let me just tell you, that's how you become political roadkill.
Right.
I mean, I think Tiffany, but
sorry, go ahead, Fernand.
I'm sorry. I think you also have to do both, Tiffany, because fundamentally, I've always said it on this show and many times that the Democrats simply need to tell the truth. And the truth right now is that we're living in an American nightmare. The American dream is in jeopardy because of this Republican project, which, again, authoritarian, wants to take away rights. It's not a theoretical anymore. It's happened for the first time in our history. This extreme Republican Party has taken away our rights. And I think the way you inspire people is by telling the truth. Dispel with this notion of working with the Republicans. I think that's the greatest crime that the Democrats have done so far. There is no bipartisanship with an authoritarian fascist project. The other component of this, Tiffany, that I think is critical, there is a generational element to this as well. Democratic Party leaders under the age of 60, yes, venerate and work with the experience of your Democratic Party elders, but those of us that are under 60, we need to fight for our future and our children's futures with the ones that have the most vested in them. I want to hear the Hakeem Jeffries. I want to hear the Brian Schatz. I want to hear other leaders in the Democratic Congress under the age of 60 start to rise up and take the mantle of leadership, which is what we need to meet this moment with that inspirational call about what exactly is the choice if we turn this government over to a fascist Republican Party. If people understand that, I think the results will be what the American people want.
Because that's what has to happen. Well, we have to stop saying right-wing extremists and Republicans as if these are two different groups of people. They are one and the same, and we should be honest about that. Lynn, I'm curious to hear from you because, look, we could be looking at a DeSantis ticket in 2024. It doesn't have to beat Trump. I'm curious to hear from you. Who on the Democratic side do you think could beat either a Trump ticket or a DeSantis ticket?
I think that's really hard to answer. But I mean, Tiffany, you had some very young Gen Z congressional candidates on your show. I mean, someone like Maxwell Frost, 25 years old, running for Congress.
He's coming up at the end of the hour.
He is coming. Okay, perfect. Yeah. I mean, y'all are going to see this, but I mean, Brittany touched on this, Fernand, you touched on this, but the average age of Democratic leadership is 71. It's 71. And with this Democratic base, it'll get younger, it'll be more progressive, and it's going to be with people who have far too much to lose, right? So I think in terms of who needs to be on this ticket, I also think we have to look at Democratic leadership. People are ready for new leadership. And I think that's going to be reflected with how many more younger people are going to be running for office, because again, they really have no choice. Yeah. They really don't. So I think we're just ready to see a whole new slate of younger people who really represent what this country is.
Well, I'm up against a hard break, Brittany, but just really quickly from you, we're over time, they're telling me, but I just want to hear from you. What role does Vice President Harris play in midterms this cycle and in 2024?
I think it has to be a critical one. She deserves to be a voice that is out front, the kind of fighter that we saw in those Kavanaugh hearings. That is who people went to the polls and elected. And the Biden administration really would do itself a favor by making sure that hers is a voice that is out front, that the communities that she reflects are out front, and that they are accomplishing an agenda that truly defends their base.
Yeah, and I just want to point out to our viewers, there were things that got accomplished by Democrats. The House passed a number of bills. They died in the Senate, but there was the bipartisan infrastructure bill that did pass Congress, and the COVID relief funding that also came from Democrats. So just in case the messaging is not reaching you, we want to make sure that we're informing you here. Thank you so much, Fernand Amandi, Brittany Packnett Cunningham, and Lynn Nguyen for your fiery discussion this morning. And